The champagne glasses clinked in the sterile hospital waiting room. And that's when I knew something was terribly wrong. Dylan Whitmore's hands trembled as he paced outside the delivery room, his $2,000 shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. Inside, his wife, Ayanna, was fighting for her life. Outside, his mother, Victoria, and sister Charlotte sat with their designer handbags perched on their laps like shields, their faces carefully composed masks of concern that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Mr. Whitmore?" The nurse's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "There are complications. The bleeding won't stop." Dylan's world tilted. 5 years ago, he'd been on the cover of Forbes as the youngest tech billionaire to revolutionize artificial intelligence. He'd built an empire from nothing, commanded boardrooms filled with the world's most powerful people. But in this moment, he was utterly powerless. The woman he loved, the woman his family had spent 2 years trying to destroy, was dying, and there was nothing his billions could do to stop it. "Do something," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I don't care what it costs. Save her." Behind him, he heard the whisper. Soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. His mother's voice, dripping with something that made his blood run cold. "It's almost over." "Where are you watching from?" You can just drop your location in the comments. This story is about to take a turn you won't believe. And if you're new here, subscribe to Heart Vault Stories so you never miss a moment of drama like this. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Dylan's mind raced through memories. Ayanna's radiant smile when he'd proposed on that rooftop in Manhattan, the way his family's faces had fallen when he'd introduced his brilliant, beautiful, black fiancée at the annual Whitmore Gala. His mother's icy assessment. "She's not one of us, Dylan. She'll ruin everything we've built." But Ayanna hadn't ruined anything. She'd made him better, challenged him, loved him with a fierce authenticity he'd never known in his world of corporate sharks and social climbers. And when she'd told him she was pregnant, glowing with joy and hope, he'd promised her they'd build a new kind of family, one founded on love, not legacy. The delivery room doors burst open. Dr. Martinez emerged, his surgical mask pulled down, his expression unreadable. Dylan's heart stopped. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry." The world went silent. Dylan couldn't hear anything over the roaring in his ears. Behind him, he heard movement. Charlotte gasping, Victoria standing up. And then, impossibly, a sound that would haunt him forever. His mother exhaling, long and slow, like she'd been holding her breath for 2 years. Like she'd been waiting for this. "Your wife didn't make it," Dr. Martinez continued, his hand on Dylan's shoulder. "The hemorrhaging was too severe. We did everything we could." Dylan's knees buckled. The fluorescent lights above him blurred into white stars. Ayanna, his Ayanna, gone. The mother of his child is gone. His future shattered like, "But Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Martinez said, his voice cutting through the grief like a lifeline. "The baby survived." Dylan's head snapped up. "What?" "It's twins," the doctor said. And for the first time that night, he smiled. "2 healthy baby girls. They're going to be just fine." The silence that followed was deafening. Dylan stood frozen, his mind unable to process the words. Twins. 2 daughters. 2 pieces of Ayanna, still alive, still breathing. Behind him, a champagne glass shattered against the floor. Dylan turned slowly to see his mother standing rigid, her face drained of color, her hand still extended from where she'd dropped her drink. Charlotte stared at Victoria with an expression Dylan had never seen before. Pure, undiluted horror. Twins? Victoria whispered. And in that single word, Dylan heard something that made his grief crystallize into ice-cold clarity. She hadn't been hoping for Ayanna to survive. She'd been celebrating that she wouldn't. The nursery was supposed to be a sanctuary. Instead, it had become a battlefield. Dylan held Grace in his left arm and Hope in his right. Their tiny fists curled against his chest and watched his mother rearrange his life like pieces on a chessboard. Victoria Whitmore moved through the mansion's west wing with the precision of a general securing enemy territory, directing a parade of nannies, designers, and staff members who transformed Ayanna's carefully planned nursery into something sterile and cold. "These colors are far too vibrant," Victoria declared, gesturing dismissively at the warm earth tones Ayanna had chosen. "Whitmore children require sophistication from birth. I've hired Celeste from the Wellington family. She'll ensure the girls are raised properly." "Their mother already chose everything," Dylan said, his voice hollow. 3 weeks since Ayanna's death, and he still couldn't say her name without his throat closing. This is what she wanted. "Their mother is gone, darling." Victoria's tone was almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "And you're in no condition to make decisions. Look at yourself. You haven't slept. You barely eat. Let me help you. If you're loving this story, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button for Heart Vault stories. We're just getting started with this twisted tale." But Dylan wasn't sleeping, because every time he closed his eyes, he saw that moment in the hospital. The dropped champagne glass, his mother's face, that exhale of relief. He'd tried to convince himself he'd imagined it, that grief was making him paranoid, until he found Ayanna's journal. It was hidden in her nightstand, beneath a stack of architecture magazines. Dylan had been looking for her wedding ring to give to the girls someday, when his fingers brushed the leather binding. Inside, Ayanna's elegant handwriting filled page after page, and with each word, Dylan's world cracked open. "Victoria cornered me in the hallway today. She said I'd never truly be a Whitmore, that my children would be tainted by my bloodline. Charlotte just watched and said nothing. They canceled my lunch reservation at the club again. When I arrived, the hostess said Mrs. Whitmore Sr. had called to inform them I was no longer a member of the family." Dylan doesn't see it. He's so busy saving the world with his technology, he doesn't notice how they erase me from his life, piece by piece. I'm starting to feel invisible in my own home. The entries went on for months. Death by 1,000 cuts, each one inflicted by the women he'd trusted most in the world. Dylan's hands shook as he read the final entry, dated 3 days before Ayanna went into labor. "Victoria said something strange today. She asked how I felt about the pregnancy, if I was scared of complications. She mentioned a friend whose daughter-in-law had a tragic incident during childbirth. The way she looked at me when she said it. Dylan, if something happens to me, please know that I loved you and our baby more than anything. Please don't let them win." Dylan closed the journal, his chest tight with rage and grief. That's when he noticed the hospital bills scattered across his desk, bills his assistant had flagged with yellow sticky notes, unexplained charges, time gaps in the medical records, a nurse's note that had been redacted. He picked up his phone with trembling fingers and dialed the one person he'd sworn never to use. Marcus Chen, a private investigator who specialized in cases the wealthy wanted buried. "I need you to investigate my wife's death," Dylan said when Marcus answered. "And Marcus? I think my mother killed her." 2 weeks later, Marcus sat across from Dylan in his downtown office, a manila folder between them that might as well have been a bomb. "You're not going to like this," Marcus said. "But you were right to call me." He opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, text messages, and a photograph that made Dylan's blood run cold. His mother, meeting with a hospital nurse in a parking garage, an envelope passing between them. "Your mother paid Nurse Jennifer Walsh $50,000, Marcus said quietly. The text messages spell it out. She was told to delay administering critical medications during your wife's labor, to let complications run their course. Dylan stared at the evidence, his mind refusing to process it. His mother, his own mother, had orchestrated Ayanna's death. "There's more," Marcus continued, sliding another document across the desk. "Your sister Charlotte knew. She was copied on several of these messages. She didn't participate in the planning, but she knew what was happening and did nothing to stop it." The office walls seemed to close in. Dylan thought of Grace and Hope, sleeping peacefully in their cribs, unaware that their grandmother was a murderer and their aunt a coward. "Mr. Whitmore?" Marcus's voice seemed to come from far away. "What do you want to do with this information?" Dylan looked at the photograph of his mother again, at her cold, calculating expression as she handed blood money to a woman who'd let his wife die. He thought of Ayanna's journal entries, her fear, her loneliness, her final warning. "Please don't let them win." "I want justice," Dylan said, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I want my mother arrested. I want the world to know what she did." "That's going to destroy your family's reputation," Marcus warned. "The Whitmore name will be synonymous with scandal. Your business empire could collapse. Are you prepared for that?" Dylan stood, walking to the window where he could see the city Ayanna had loved, the skyline she'd helped design. In the glass's reflection, he saw a man he barely recognized, hollowed out by grief, hardened by betrayal, but still standing, still fighting. "My family destroyed itself the day they decided Ayanna wasn't worthy of the Whitmore name," he said. "Now I'm just finishing what they started." But before Marcus could respond, Dylan's phone erupted with notifications. Text messages from his lawyer, his assistant, his business partner, all saying the same thing. Victoria had filed an emergency petition with the court, claiming Dylan was mentally unstable and seeking immediate custody of the twins. The war wasn't coming. It was already here. The courtroom felt like a coliseum, and Dylan knew he was walking into an arena where only one of them would walk out alive, at least metaphorically. Maybe literally, depending on how this ended. Judge Patricia Morrison presided from her bench, her silver hair pulled back severely, her expression unreadable as she reviewed the emergency custody petition. In the gallery, reporters packed every seat, their cameras and phones ready to capture the fall of the Whitmore dynasty. The tech billionaire versus his own mother in a battle for his children. It was ratings gold, scandal candy, and Dylan hated every second of it. Victoria sat at the plaintiff's table, perfectly composed in Chanel, her lawyer whispering in her ear. She looked every inch the concerned grandmother, worried about her unstable son and her vulnerable granddaughters. Charlotte sat beside her, but Dylan noticed something different. His sister wouldn't meet his eyes, and her hands trembled in her lap. Drop a comment if you think Dylan should expose his mother. This is about to get intense. Don't forget to subscribe to Heart Vault Stories if you want to see how this all ends. Your Honor, Victoria's attorney began, standing with theatrical flair. My client comes before you today with a heavy heart. Her son, Dylan Whitmore, has become increasingly erratic since his wife's tragic passing. He's made wild accusations against family members, hired investigators to harass hospital staff, and has become so consumed by conspiracy theories that we fear for the safety of his infant daughters. Dylan's attorney, Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister and the most ruthless family lawyer in Manhattan, rose smoothly. Your Honor, if I may, my client isn't having a breakdown. He's uncovered evidence of a crime committed by the very woman seeking custody of his children. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like lightning. Order. Ms. Chen, that's a serious allegation. I have serious evidence, Your Honor. Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out the manila folder. Bank statements showing a $50,000 payment from Victoria Whitmore to Jennifer Walsh, a labor and delivery nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital. Text messages between Mrs. Whitmore and her daughter Charlotte discussing their plan to, and I quote, let nature take its course during Ayanna Whitmore's delivery. And testimony from the nurse herself, who has agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. The silence that followed was absolute. Dylan watched his mother's mask crack. Just for a moment, a flicker of panic crossing her face before she smoothed it away. This is absurd, Victoria's attorney sputtered. These documents could be fabricated. They're not. Charlotte's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. Every head in the courtroom turned. Charlotte stood, her face pale but determined, tears streaming down her cheeks. Charlotte, sit down, Victoria hissed. But Charlotte shook her head. No, Mother, I'm done. She turned to Judge Morrison. Everything in those documents is real. I have the recordings. The courtroom exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Victoria lunged for Charlotte, screaming. Bailiffs rushed forward, and Dylan sat frozen, watching his sister pull out her phone with shaking hands. I recorded our conversations, Charlotte said, her voice breaking. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I kept thinking she would stop, that it was just talk. But then Ayanna died, and I knew. I knew what we'd done. She played the first recording. Victoria's voice filled the courtroom, cold and clear. The girl needs to understand her place. If complications arise during delivery, well, these things happen. Jennifer will ensure no one acts too hastily. Dylan closed his eyes, Ayanna's face filling his vision. This was it. The truth, finally spoken in the light. Judge Morrison's expression had transformed from skeptical to horrified. Mrs. Whitmore, you have the right to remain silent. I did it for the family, Victoria screamed, all pretense of composure shattered. That woman would have destroyed everything we built. Those children, they're not real Whitmores. They're tainted. The courtroom fell silent. Even her own attorney looked horrified. I only wanted to scare her, Victoria continued, her voice rising hysterically. The nurse was only supposed to delay things, to make it difficult. I didn't mean for her to actually die, but then she did, and I thought it was over. Until he said twins. Twins! 2 of them to inherit our fortune, our name, too little. Stop talking, her attorney begged. But Victoria was beyond reason now. Months of careful control exploding in a single catastrophic moment. Do you know what people will think? Victoria shrieked at Dylan. What will they say about the Whitmore legacy when those girls grow up? I built this family. I protected our name, and you threw it all away for some. Finish that sentence, Dylan said quietly, standing for the first time. Please, Mother, tell this courtroom exactly what you think of my daughters, of my wife. Say it clearly, so everyone can hear what kind of woman you really are. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed, and in that silence, Dylan saw everything he needed to see. The hatred, the bigotry, the cold calculation that had killed the woman he loved. Judge Morrison stood, her face carved from stone. Bailiffs, place Mrs. Victoria Whitmore under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and criminally negligent homicide. Charlotte Whitmore, you'll be detained for questioning regarding your knowledge of and participation in these events. She turned to Dylan, her expression softening just slightly. Mr. Whitmore, the emergency custody petition is denied. Your daughters will remain with you. And I'm sorry for your loss. As the bailiffs led his mother away in handcuffs, Victoria turned one last time, her eyes meeting Dylan's. You'll regret this, she said. You're destroying everything. No, Mother, Dylan replied, his voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. You already did that. I'm just making sure everyone knows. The courtroom doors closed behind her, with a finality that echoed through Dylan's chest. He looked at Charlotte, who stood crying at the defendant's table, and wondered if forgiveness was possible. If redemption was real. If his daughters would ever understand the price their grandmother had paid for her, hatred. But those were questions for another day. Today, justice has been served. Ayanna could rest now. The media called it the Whitmore scandal. Dylan called it Tuesday. 3 months after his mother's arrest, Dylan stood in his downtown office, not the gleaming Whitmore Industries headquarters, but a smaller space with warm lighting and photographs of Ayanna covering every surface. He'd resigned as CEO the day after the trial, shocking the business world but freeing himself from a legacy built on secrets and lies. Mr. Whitmore? His new assistant, Maria, poked her head through the door. Charlotte is here. Should I send her away again? Dylan had ignored 17 of Charlotte's attempts to see him. Letters, calls, and flowers were sent to the house with cards that always said the same thing. I'm sorry. Please let me explain. Please let me meet my nieces. No, Dylan said, surprising himself. Send her in. Charlotte looked different, thinner, older somehow, though only months had passed. She wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of designer clothes, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked, Dylan realized, like someone who'd stopped performing. I don't expect forgiveness, Charlotte said before Dylan could speak. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I've been testifying against Mother, giving prosecutors everything I have, and I started therapy 3 times a week. Dylan studied his sister, looking for the woman who'd stood by while Ayanna suffered. Why didn't you stop her? Because I was a coward. Charlotte's voice broke. Because I told myself it was just words, just Mother being dramatic. Because by the time I realized what she'd actually done, it was too late, and I was terrified of losing everything too. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But I lost everything anyway. I lost you. I lost my nieces. I lost myself. You lost Ayanna, Dylan said quietly. You could have saved her, Charlotte. 1 phone call, 1 warning. That's all it would have taken. I know. Charlotte wiped her eyes. I'll spend the rest of my life knowing that. But Dylan, I'm asking, not for forgiveness, but for a chance to be the Aunt Grace and Hope deserve, a chance to honor Ayanna's memory by being better than the woman I was. Dylan walked to the window, looking out at the city. Forgiveness felt impossible, but he thought of his daughters, growing up without their mother, and wondered what Ayanna would want. She'd been so full of grace, even when his family had given her none. Therapy, Dylan said finally. For at least a year, and you volunteer at the foundation. Charlotte's head snapped up. The foundation? The Ayanna Whitmore Foundation for Maternal Health Equity. Dylan pulled out his phone, showing her the website. I'm using my money for something that matters. Reducing maternal mortality rates for Black women. Making sure no other family loses what I lost. You want to make amends? Start there. Yes, Charlotte breathed. Yes, absolutely. When do I start? Tomorrow, 8 a.m., don't be late. Dylan paused at the door, then turned back. And Charlotte, you can meet the girls, but earn it first. Prove that you're someone they should know. Charlotte nodded, crying openly now. Thank you. I won't let you down. I won't let them down. After she left, Dylan pulled out his phone and opened the video he watched every night. Ayanna, 7 months pregnant, standing in the nursery they designed together. I hope they have your eyes, she said to the camera, to him, to the daughters she'd never hold. I hope they have your kindness. I hope they grow up knowing they're loved fiercely, completely, without condition. And I hope they change the world, Dylan. I hope they make it better than we found it. The video ended, and Dylan sat in the silence, feeling the weight of his choices. He'd destroyed his family's empire to honor her memory. He'd sacrificed everything his mother had built to give his daughters something better. Truth. But was it enough? Would Grace and Hope someday understand why their father had torn apart the Whitmore name? Would they forgive him for the grandmother they'd never know, the aunt they'd barely remember? His phone buzzed. A text from the foundation director. Just saved our 100th life. Ayanna would be proud. Dylan smiled through his tears. Maybe it was enough after all. 5 years later, Dylan sat on a park bench watching Grace chase Hope through falling autumn leaves, their laughter echoing across the playground like music. Daddy, look, Grace shouted, holding up a sketch she'd drawn in the dirt with a stick. It's a building with a garden on top, just like Mama used to make. Dylan's throat tightened. Grace had inherited Ayanna's gift for architecture, her eye for beauty and structure. Hope had inherited her laugh, that full, joyous sound that used to fill their home. Together, his daughters were living proof that love survived even the darkest attempts to destroy it. Beautiful, sweetheart, Dylan called back. Show Aunt Charlotte when she gets here. Charlotte visited every Sunday now, arriving with homemade cookies and stories about the mothers and babies the foundation had saved that week. She'd kept her word, volunteering for 4 years straight, attending every therapy session, slowly rebuilding herself into someone worthy of her niece's trust. The relationship would never be easy, never simple, but it existed. That was something. Uncle Dylan, Hope ran over, breathless. Can we see Mama's video tonight? Of course. Dylan pulled out his phone, and both girls crowded against him, their small bodies warm and solid and real. He played the video they'd watched 100 times, Ayanna glowing and alive, talking to her unborn babies about the world she wanted to build for them. She was pretty, Grace whispered, like she always did. She was everything, Dylan replied, like he always did. When Charlotte arrived, she sat with them, and they told stories about Ayanna, the real stories, the true ones, not the sanitized version his mother had wanted erased. They talked about her brilliance, her strength, her refusal to be diminished by people who thought she was less than she was. Later, after the girls had fallen asleep in Charlotte's lap and his sister had carried them to the car, Dylan stood alone in the park, watching the sun set over the city Ayanna had loved. His phone buzzed. An email from the foundation. They'd just opened their 10th clinic, this one in a community where maternal mortality rates had been the highest in the state. The Ayanna Whitmore Foundation had saved 847 lives in 5 years. 847 mothers who went home to their babies. 847 families that stayed whole. It would never bring her back. Nothing could. But every life saved was a testament to who she'd been, what she'd meant, how fiercely she deserved to be honored and remembered. Victoria was serving 15 years for criminally negligent homicide. She'd sent letters, dozens of them, begging for forgiveness, asking to meet her granddaughters. Dylan had burned every single one. Some wounds didn't heal. Some bridges needed to stay burned. But Grace and Hope would grow up knowing their mother's truth. They'd grow up in a world that valued them, protected them, and celebrated them. They'd grow up knowing that justice mattered, that love was worth fighting for, that legacy wasn't about money or names or empires. It was about what you left behind in the hearts of people who survived you. Dylan pulled out his phone one last time, looking at his favorite photo. Ayanna's hand on her pregnant belly, her wedding ring catching the light, her smile so full of hope it still broke his heart. "We're okay," he whispered to her memory, to the woman who'd changed everything. "Your daughters are okay, and the world is better because you were in it." The sun set completely, and Dylan walked home to his girls, carrying Ayanna's love like a lantern through the gathering dark. The lesson here: hatred destroys the person who carries it far more than the person it targets. Love, true, unconditional love, survives everything, even death. It's what we leave behind that defines our legacy, not what we take with us. If this story moved you, subscribe to Heart Vault Stories right now. Hit that button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next emotional journey. Drop a comment telling us what you thought. Did Dylan make the right choice? Should Charlotte have been forgiven? We want to hear from you. Subscribe to Heart Vault Stories and join our community of story lovers. See you in the next one.